Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Sherman Reed, and I'm back with yet another video. Today I'll be discussing the top 5 books that I read during the winter season. I got this idea from Reagan's channel because she basically just does top 5 books that she read every season, and I actually really like the idea, especially when I consider the fact that I only do one like best books of the year kind of thing, and I read so many books throughout the year that just finding 10 books that I read out of like 200, 300 books that I read every year is very small. So doing a seasonal kind of update in terms of the best books that I read every season might actually be really beneficial. So anyways, let's just get right into it. So these are books that I read during the winter season, specifically December, January, and February. They're also not in any particular order, so just as an FYI there. So the first book that I want to discuss is That Night by Amy Giles. This book follows the fact that a year ago there was a shooting at a local theater that essentially rocked both Jess and Lucas's world forever. And this book actually takes place a year after that event happened and kind of just showcases how both of these families' lives had changed so much. And not only does it showcase how much they've changed, but how differently both families have reacted to the situation. Lucas, on one hand, is living with his overly protective parents, especially his mom. His mom is super protective, and he's also trying to find sense in the world because he truly believes that the world took away the wrong brother. And then Jess, on the other hand, is living with her depressed mother and is simply trying to make ends meet because her mother is basically MIA at this point. And their lives cross paths after they find this shared part-time job after school, and things just kind of follow along that line. This book I gave 5 stars because this book was just so good. It was just so beautifully written. My favorite part is that this book somehow gave you so many emotions, but also ended things in a very hopeful manner. Another aspect that I really liked about this book is how well the author portrayed how both family, Jess's and Lucas's family, how they responded so differently to essentially the same tragedy. And it was just so beautiful. The writing style was really beautiful. The emotions that was evoked from me during the book was really intense. I also felt a lot for Jess and Lucas's parents and their whole family in general. And also the romance in this book. I mean, obviously there's a romance in here because at the end of the day it's a YA book and there's always going to be some sort of aspect of romance involved. I thought that was really well done as well because there was no incel love. They were kind of just trying to figure out how a way to share their grief together, and after finding how to trust each other to share that grief, they start to fall in love, which I thought was really well portrayed, and it made things so realistic, and it was definitely something that was subtly done in a very right manner. So anyways, this book was just so amazing. I don't usually really enjoy contemporaries. I do enjoy them once in a while, but not to the extent where I'm like feeling all the emotions, because that's just how I felt for this book. Then the next book that I want to include are technically as part of a series, and that is The Cruel Prince and the Wicked King by Holly Black. I just mentioned this recently, but I won't talk about it again because I did read it during winter, and it's definitely one of my top books that I read during this winter. This book follows the fact that about 10 years ago, Jude's parents were brutally murdered, and now her and her sister are whisked off to the courts of fairy, where they now live with their like stepdad of some kind. And for the past 10 years, Jude is trying her best to find a way to fit in with the fairies. But the thing is, all Fae despises humans, and that includes Carden, who is the youngest prince. And so the series just kind of follows along the line that Jude is trying to find out a way to fit in, as well as trying to save her sisters, her family, and trying to just survive in general. And she also learns her threshold for like betrayal and bloodshed and all that stuff. And this book is so good, and I am so trash for this series, especially the Jude and Carden. Like those two, that couple, oh my goodness guys, like everything about the couple is I just want to know what happens next. I just want to find out what happens. I have so many questions, and Holly Black is destroying all of us with those endings of hers, and I have no words, guys. So obviously I gave this book 5 stars because these books are amazing, but I think I did mention recently that objectively speaking, I don't think these books were that great. If it wasn't for the fact that I was so invested with the relationship between Jude and Carden, as well as trying to find out like what happens with the plot, I don't think the writing actually is the most amazing writing. That's just my personal thoughts about it. But then again, I don't know anything about writing, guys, so I'm just saying that, but no one cares what I say about objectively speaking because I am not a writer. I definitely have no knowledge in that area. So yeah, anyways. So there's definitely a number of reasons why I love this series so much. One, I love Jude and Carden's relationship. I know it's toxic in some ways, but I think it works really well in the society that they're both in. And the fact that Jude is also a very badass female character. I mean, the way how she manipulated all of these situations for her favor is just so well done. It's very ingenious, very smart, very clever of her, and I really appreciate that. So I think those are the 2 main reasons why I really like the series, because I mean, I am just trash for that relationship. That romance thing needs to happen. I need to see what happens with that later because there's just so many unanswered questions there that I really need to know what happens. And I'm also really curious to see how Jude will react and how she responds to what had happened at the end of book 2. So there's just so many questions I have that are left unanswered, and I cannot wait for the third and final book of the series to come out. The next book that I want to mention is Radium Girls by Kate Moore. This is a nonfiction book that delves into the history of the Radium Girls. This book was so good. I gave it 5 stars. It's definitely going to be one of the very few nonfiction books that I will ever discuss on the channel because I don't usually read nonfiction. But this book it's just so good. So many reasons why I love this book so much. One, Kate Moore and how she went about her way to research and kind of uncover the lives of these women and just kind of bringing that to life was just so well done, I think. And two, the content was just simply mind-blowing because I feel like no one really knows about the Radium Girls, but the content itself is actually so fascinating. The history of it is just so fascinating to find out, you know, what this corporation did, how many lives it affected, like the women's lives it affected, the lawsuits that went under, like all that stuff was just so fascinating. And I guess the way how Kate Moore did that research and how she wrote this book just made you so connected and invested to everyone's stories that were like all these women's story that you really cannot not finish it. Like I was just so riveted by this entire book. But the best part I think is the fact that this book does not read as a nonfiction book. It doesn't read as like a textbook or just a history fact, etc. It reads kind of as a historical fiction, except the fact that you know that everything that is mentioned in this book is completely true because this is a nonfiction book. And so when you read about what this corporation had done, the lives that it had affected, and even the effects it has on society today, like in the past 5-10 years, it's just so fascinating, and I enjoyed this book so much. If you have to pick up one nonfiction book, I definitely recommend this one. Then the next book that I want to share is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. This book was so well done. I gave it 5 stars. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. This book follows Ren, who is the prince, and he's basically been living the past like 300 plus times, reliving the fall of his 18th birthday, and at the end of each season he turns into a monster and basically just kills everyone in sight. And the only person left in the castle right now is his commander Gray. And Gray, at the beginning of every cycle, he is tasked with the job of finding another girl for Ren to potentially fall in love with, or for her to fall in love with him. And obviously, as we know as fairy tales goes, once you fall in love, it will break this curse. And the girl this time that Gray brought over is Harper. Harper comes from our world in DC. So this book I loved so much. I think it was so well done. It also has some really great disability representation, and that's because Harper has a physical disability, but she does not let that stop her by any means. She's still very brave and courageous and determined, and I love her so much. I love the depiction of these relationships between Harper and Gray, Gray with Ren, Ren with Harper, as well as Harper, like her relationship with her own family. Like that was also really well done, I think. I also like the fact that there's so many facets to these characters, especially Ren. I mean, at first glance, he comes off as kind of cold, kind of calculating, and he always seems to have some sort of ulterior motive. But once you get to know him a little bit more, once you start to understand where he's coming from, the fact that he has spent the past 300 plus times killing everyone inside, becoming a monster, etc., you start to understand where he's coming from. And not only that, because he's not just concerned about himself, but he's also really concerned about his people, his country in general, and that is so admirable of him. And Gray, I don't really need to say more about him because he's so loyal to the core. I mean, everything that he does is just loyal to Ren. He could have just been like, see ya, and would just been out of this curse long time ago if he wished to, but he didn't. And the fact that he stayed with him for the past like 300 plus times, and the fact that he is like the sole person who understands him in every single way, is just such a great trait to have. And like, I'm like, where is Gray in my life, guys? Like, I had such serious second lead syndrome because Gray was everything. So I would definitely say that this book, the characters definitely stood out the most for me, but of course the plot was also really intense as well because there's monsters, there's curses, there's princesses, you know, saving the kingdom, etc. And I mean, it's basically Beauty and the Beast, but so much better. The last book that I want to discuss is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This book follows a girl called Eliza who in real life has no friends, she's very lonely, but on the internet, everything changes. She's actually the creator of a very famous webcomic called Monstrous Seas. And so because she has this amazing online life, she can't imagine her real life to be anything similar to that. And then one day she meets a guy called Wallace. Wallace is the new kid in school. He turns out to be her webcomic's most famous fanfiction writer. And not knowing who she truly is, he manages to draw her out into the real world a little bit every day. This book was just so well done. It was so adorable. I gave it 4.5 stars. It also has some really great mental illness representation. This is definitely a book where I think the characters are most important to me because I like Eliza and Wallace so much. Eliza for me was very relatable to her, especially with her and her issues with her parents. I mean, growing up, I personally didn't have the same issues, but a lot of the same reasoning and the tensions behind those issues were very similar to my own, and so it was very easy for me to relate with her. And then as for Wallace, his raw emotions, his vulnerability was just everything, and I just liked him so much. But other than the characters though, I think this book also really goes into detail about real life versus online. I mean, these days social media is so prominent, and we all ask ourselves these days, like, what is real to us now? Is it our social media presence? Like, what's more important to us, our social media presence or our real life, you know? And so there's always facets of it that's true and untrue, and I think this book really goes into detail about that specific question and that idea, and I just find that really well done. So at the end of the day, I definitely recommend this book if you enjoy books with some illustrations in there, because there are some comics that are in this book. If you also enjoy books that have some great representation in terms of mental illnesses, and if you're just looking for an adorable fluffy novel, because end of the day, that's what this book is, and I liked it so much. I mean, there are definitely some serious topics that were discussed in this book, but I think at the core it is a relatively fluffy, adorable novel. So anyways, these are my top 5 books that I've read during the winter season. Let me know down below if you have read any of the books I mentioned in this video. If you haven't, let me know down below if you want to read them, if you don't want to read them. If you have read them, let me know if you like them or not. But as always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe down below, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!